The sound of a shotgun blast echoed through the chapel, sending a flock of birds scattering from the rooftop into the vast New Mexico sky. Amelia Anderson froze at the altar, her white-knuckled hands clutching a bouquet of desert wildflowers as the church doors burst open. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the harsh sunlight of 1878, was a man she'd thought she'd never see again. "I object to this union," the man declared, his voice carrying through the stunned silence of the small church. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. 3 months ago, she would have given anything to see that face again. Now he appeared like an apparition, dusty boots leaving prints on the well-swept floor of Silver Creek's only chapel. "Nathan Xavier." Her father growled from the front pew, rising to his feet. "You have some nerve showing your face here." Beside Amelia, her groom to be a man 30 years her senior whom she'd met precisely twice reached for the pistol concealed beneath his fine black coat. "Mr. Harrington, please," the Reverend said, placing a restraining hand on the older man's arm. Amelia stood frozen, 20 years old and trapped in a wedding dress that felt more like a burial shroud. The chapel held only a dozen guests, her father's business associates and her soon-to-be husband's acquaintances. Not a single friend to stand witness to her sacrifice. "Amelia," Nathan called out, taking another step forward, his hat now clutched in his hands. "I know I've got no right, but I'm asking you to marry me instead." The collective gasp that swept through the small congregation might have been comical under different circumstances. Amelia's father, red-faced with fury, moved to intercept Nathan. "My daughter is spoken for, Xavier. This wedding will proceed." "Let the girl speak for herself, Jeremiah," came a voice from the back pew. Amelia's godmother, Eleanor, the only person present who showed genuine concern for her welfare. All eyes turned to Amelia. The room seemed to spin around her as the weight of the moment pressed down. This was her life, her future hanging in the balance. Nathan stood halfway down the aisle now, his blue eyes intense beneath the shadow of his brow. He was leaner than when she'd last seen him, his face more weathered from months on the trail. "You left," she managed, her voice hardly more than a whisper. "I know." Nathan nodded gravely. "And I'll spend the rest of my days making that up to you if you'll let me." "This is preposterous," barked Gerald Harrington, the gray-haired banker who had agreed to marry her in exchange for clearing her father's substantial debts. "We have a contract." "A contract." Nathan's expression darkened. "She's a woman, not a parcel of land." Amelia's father stepped forward. "You're in no position to lecture anyone on responsibility, boy. You abandoned my daughter without a word." "I didn't abandon her," Nathan replied, his gaze never leaving Amelia's face. "I went to make something of myself, to be worthy of her." The chapel fell silent as Amelia took a small step away from the altar. Her entire body trembled beneath the layers of satin and lace. "You have 10 seconds to remove yourself from these premises," Harrington said, finally drawing his pistol and aiming it squarely at Nathan's chest. "Gerald," the Reverend protested. "No," Amelia said suddenly, her voice stronger than she expected. "There will be no bloodshed in this church today." She gathered her skirts and moved toward Nathan, ignoring her father's command to return to the altar. "You owe me an explanation," she said quietly when she reached him. "And you'll have it," he promised. "Every detail, but not here, not with a gun pointed at my heart." A murmur ran through the gathered witnesses. Amelia felt a surge of courage she hadn't experienced in months, not since her father had informed her of his financial ruin, and the arrangement he'd made with Harrington to salvage what remained of the Anderson property. "Miss Anderson," Harrington's voice cut through her thoughts, cold and precise. "I'll remind you that your father's debts are considerable. Without this marriage, your family homestead will be foreclosed upon by week's end. Is that true? Nathan asked, his eyes widening. It is, Amelia admitted, the shame of their situation burning her cheeks. Father borrowed heavily to expand the ranch. The cattle disease last year wiped out nearly everything. Nathan's jaw tightened. And selling you was his solution. Mind your tongue, boy, Jeremiah Anderson warned. No, Father, he's right. Amelia turned to face the congregation, her resolve strengthening with each passing moment. I agreed to this marriage to save our home, but I will not pledge myself to a man I do not love when. She hesitated, looking back at Nathan. When my heart lies elsewhere. This is absurd, Harrington snapped, his finger tightening on the trigger. Jeremiah, control your daughter. Put the gun down, Harrington, came a new voice from the church entrance. Sheriff Thomas Miller stood with his hand on his own holstered weapon. No weddings or funerals today if I can help it. The tension in the room shifted as Harrington reluctantly lowered his pistol. The sheriff nodded toward Nathan. Xavier, heard you were back in town. Causing trouble already, I see. Not intentionally, Sheriff, Nathan replied, though his eyes never left Amelia. Well, intentions aside, you've disrupted what was meant to be a legal proceeding. The sheriff sighed, removing his hat. Miss Anderson, are you being coerced into this marriage? Amelia hesitated, acutely aware of her father's glare. I entered into the arrangement willingly, she said carefully, to save our ranch, but my heart was not consulted in the matter. I see. The sheriff looked between the assembled parties. Well, it seems to me this wedding needs postponing until certain matters are cleared up. Unacceptable, Harrington declared. I have extended considerable credit to the Anderson family on the understanding that this union would take place today. Nathan stepped forward. I have a proposition, Mr. Harrington. I'm not interested in anything you have to say, Cowboy, the banker sneered. Even if it involves settling Jeremiah Anderson's debt in full. A stunned silence fell over the chapel. Amelia stared at Nathan in disbelief. Her father's gambling and poor investments had accumulated debts that would take years to repay. How could a ranch hand possibly have access to that kind of money? Nathan, she whispered. What are you saying? He smiled slightly. I told you I want to make something of myself. Turns out I have a knack for finding silver where others see only dirt. You struck a claim. Her father asked incredulously. A rich one, Nathan confirmed. Up near the Colorado Territory. Been working it quietly these past months. Harrington's expression wavered between skepticism and interest. And you're willing to settle Anderson's debt? In exchange for two things, Nathan said firmly. First, all claims against the Anderson ranch are to be nullified, with no possibility of future collection. The banker's eyes narrowed. And the second, Nathan turned to Amelia, taking her hands in his, the freedom for Amelia to make her own choice about whom she marries without financial pressure. Amelia felt tears welling in her eyes. You came back, she whispered. Always intended to, he replied softly. Just took longer than I planned. Harrington cleared his throat loudly. This is all very touching, but I require proof of your claims before any discussion of debt forgiveness. Fair enough, Nathan conceded. Sheriff, would you escort Mr. Harrington to the assay office? I deposited a bank draft there this morning. The sheriff raised an eyebrow but nodded. Come along, Harrington. Let's verify the young man's claims. As they departed, the remaining wedding guests began to whisper among themselves. Amelia's father approached, his expression a complex mixture of relief and suspicion. If what you say is true, Xavier, I've misjudged you, he admitted grudgingly. Wouldn't be the first time, sir. Nathan kept hold of Amelia's hands. But my concern isn't winning your approval. It's earning your daughter's forgiveness." Jeremiah Anderson looked at his daughter's face, seeing the emotion there that had been absent during the wedding preparations. His shoulders sagged slightly. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion at home," he suggested, gesturing toward the church doors. As the guests filtered out, Amelia found herself still standing in the aisle with Nathan, her wedding dress gathering dust around her feet. "Did you mean it?" she asked quietly. "Your proposal?" Nathan's expression softened. "Every word, though I'd planned something more romantic than bursting into a church with a shotgun." Despite everything, Amelia laughed. "You didn't actually fire it. No, just racked it outside for effect." His smile faded into seriousness. "Amelia, I know I hurt you by leaving, but I swear, not a day passed that I didn't think of you, didn't work toward coming back to offer you a life better than what I could give before." She studied his face, seeing the sincerity there alongside the fatigue of hard travel. "You could have written." "I wanted to." He ran a thumb over her knuckles. "But I was afraid I'd fail, afraid I'd have to write and tell you I couldn't give you the life you deserve. All I wanted was you," she said softly. "Not silver mines or wealth. I know that now." He glanced toward the church doors. "Your father's waiting. Will you let me explain everything properly, after you've had a chance to change out of?" He gestured to her wedding dress. Amelia nodded, finally releasing his hands. "Come to the house for supper. We have much to discuss." "I'll be there," he promised, the intensity in his eyes making her heart race anew. As she turned to leave, he called after her, "Amelia, for what it's worth, you make the most beautiful bride I've ever seen. I just hope next time you'll be walking toward me, not away." The heat that rose to her cheeks had nothing to do with the New Mexico sun beating down outside the chapel doors. The Anderson ranch sat on the outskirts of Silver Creek, a modest homestead that had once been the center of a promising cattle operation. As Amelia changed out of her wedding dress, she gazed through her bedroom window at the empty corrals and weathered barn. Where once 50 head of cattle had grazed, now only a few horses remained, stark evidence of her father's financial collapse. She selected a simple blue dress, her fingers trembling slightly as she fastened the buttons. Nathan was back. The thought kept repeating in her mind like a prayer. After months of believing he had abandoned her, after resigning herself to a loveless marriage to save her childhood home, he had returned with promises that seemed too miraculous to trust. A knock at her bedroom door interrupted her thoughts. "Amelia." Her godmother Eleanor's voice was gentle. "May I come in?" "Yes, of course." Eleanor entered, her kind eyes taking in Amelia's appearance. "You look more yourself already," she observed, helping Amelia pin up her hair. "That wedding dress made you look like a ghost." "I felt like one," Amelia admitted, walking toward a kind of death. Eleanor sighed, placing her hands on Amelia's shoulders. "I tried to convince your father there had to be another way." "I know you did." Amelia squeezed her godmother's hand gratefully. "But what choice did we have? The bank was going to take everything. And now this young man appears like something out of a storybook." Eleanor shook her head wonderingly. "Do you still love him, Amelia?" The question hung in the air between them. Did she? After the pain of his disappearance, after months of anger and heartbreak. Yet seeing him standing in that church doorway had awakened something she thought long buried. "Yes," she finally answered, "though I'm not sure I should." "Love rarely concerns itself with should," Eleanor said with a wry smile, "but be cautious with your heart this time. Make him explain everything before you decide." Downstairs, the sound of horses approaching drew them to the window. Sheriff Miller and Nathan were riding up to the house, with Harrington following in his buggy. Amelia's father emerged from his study, his face unreadable as he went to meet them. "It seems we'll have our answers soon enough," Eleanor observed. Amelia took a deep breath, smoothing her dress nervously. I need to hear what they're saying. They descended to find the men gathered in the parlor, an unusual tension in the air. Harrington looked particularly displeased, clutching a document in his hand so tightly it had begun to crumple. "Ah, Amelia," her father said when she entered. "Mr. Xavier's claims have been verified. It appears he is indeed in a position to settle our debts." Harrington thrust the paper toward Jeremiah Anderson. "The deed release, as agreed. Your property is clear of all liens, though I maintain this entire arrangement is highly irregular." "Irregular but legal," the sheriff interjected. "I've witnessed the transaction myself." Nathan stood slightly apart from the others, his hat in his hands. When his eyes met Amelia's, a small smile touched his lips. "Mr. Harrington," Amelia said, finding her voice, "I apologize for the way things unfolded today." The banker's expression remained stony. "Save your apologies, Miss Anderson. Business is business, though I expect this intervention will be the talk of Silver Creek for months to come." He turned to Jeremiah. "Our business is concluded. Good day." After Harrington departed, the sheriff tipped his hat. "I'll be heading back to town as well. Xavier, try to stay out of trouble for at least a week, would you? My deputy's getting married on Saturday, and I'd prefer not to have any more disrupted ceremonies." When only Nathan, Amelia, her father, and Alina remained, an awkward silence descended on the parlor. Finally, Jeremiah cleared his throat. "I believe some explanations are in order, Xavier." Nathan nodded. "Yes, sir, I owe that to all of you, especially Amelia. Perhaps over supper." Alina suggested diplomatically, "I'll help Maria in the kitchen." As Alina excused herself, Jeremiah gestured for Nathan to sit. "You can start by telling me how a ranch hand comes into the kind of money that clears a debt like mine." Nathan sat across from Amelia, his eyes occasionally finding hers as he began his tale. "After my father died last year, I was going through his papers and found an old map. He'd always talked about a silver claim he'd staked years before I was born, but everyone thought it was just tall tales. The map showed a location up in the mountains near the Colorado border." "So you just left to chase a fairy tale?" Jeremiah asked skeptically. "Not exactly." Nathan's gaze shifted to Amelia. "I'd been saving to buy a small piece of land to have something to offer. When I found that map, I thought maybe it could be a shortcut, a way to build a future faster." "You never said anything," Amelia said softly. Nathan's expression grew pained. "I was afraid to get your hopes up. I planned to scout the location, be gone a few weeks at most. If nothing came of it, no one would need to know I'd chased a fool's dream." "But something did come of it," Jeremiah pressed. "Yes, sir. The claim was real and rich, but it wasn't as simple as just digging up silver and coming home." Nathan leaned forward, his voice earnest. "The claim had been jumped. There were men working it illegally, men who didn't take kindly to me showing up with my father's deed." Amelia's breath caught. "You were in danger." Nathan nodded grimly. "There was trouble. The kind that meant I couldn't risk sending word that might be traced back to you." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a jagged scar along his forearm. "Took a bullet defending what was rightfully mine. Spent weeks recovering in a mining camp with no proper doctor." Jeremiah's expression softened slightly. "And after that, I had to file official paperwork, secure the claim legally, hire trustworthy men to work it." Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "Everything took 3 times longer than I expected. By the time I had the situation under control and could finally head back to Silver Creek, nearly 5 months had passed." "And you had no way to send word?" Amelia questioned, her heart conflicted. "I sent 2 letters," Nathan replied, meeting her eyes. One from the mining camp when I was recovering, another from Denver when I was finalizing the banking arrangements. Neither reached you. Jeremiah and Amelia exchanged a look. We received nothing, her father confirmed. Nathan's jaw tightened. The stagecoach route through that territory has been hit by bandits several times. I feared as much, which is why I pushed to return as quickly as possible. And when did you learn about? Amelia gestured vaguely, unable to directly reference the wedding that had nearly occurred. 3 days ago, in Santa Fe. Nathan's expression darkened. I was arranging the final bank drafts when I overheard travelers from Silver Creek discussing the upcoming wedding between the town's banker and Jeremiah Anderson's daughter. I rode day and night to get here in time. Alina appeared in the doorway. Supper is ready if you'd all like to come to the table. As they moved to the dining room, Amelia found herself walking beside Nathan. You really came straight from Santa Fe? She asked quietly. Barely stopped to water the horse, he confirmed with a small smile. Couldn't let you marry that old buzzard, could I? Despite herself, Amelia felt a smile tugging at her lips. He's not so terrible. He pointed a gun at me in a church, Nathan reminded her dryly. Well, you did interrupt his wedding. Their eyes met, and for a moment it was as if the months apart dissolved. Then Amelia remembered the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, believing he had abandoned her without a word. I'm still angry with you, she said softly as they reached the dining room. I know, he replied, his voice equally quiet. I'd be worried if you weren't. Throughout the meal, the conversation gradually shifted from Nathan's silver mine to the future of the Anderson ranch. With their debts cleared, there was potential to rebuild, perhaps even expand if the right investments were made. I've secured a partnership with a cattle broker in Santa Fe, Nathan explained. If you're amenable, Mr. Anderson, he's prepared to supply you with prime breeding stock to restore your herd. Jeremiah studied the younger man with newfound respect. That's remarkably generous, Xavier. Not generosity, sir. Investment. In Silver Creek in this ranch. His eyes found Amelia's across the table. In what I hope will be my future family. The directness of his statement sent warmth flooding through Amelia's cheeks. He hadn't abandoned his earlier proposal, even after the chaos of the day had settled. After dinner, Alina tactfully suggested that Jeremiah help her review some paperwork, leaving Amelia and Nathan alone on the front porch as the sun began to set over the distant mountains. They sat side by side on the porch swing, a respectable distance between them that nonetheless felt charged with unspoken emotions. You're mine, Amelia finally said, breaking the silence. Is it truly as prosperous as you claim? Nathan nodded. The initial assays suggest it's one of the richest veins discovered in the territory in years. I've hired a foreman. I trust, a man named Curtis who served with my father in the war. He's overseeing operations while I'm away. And will you go back there? The question carried more weight than its simple words suggested. Nathan turned to face her fully. That depends entirely on you, Amelia. On me. I didn't come back just to save your father's ranch, he said earnestly. I came back for you. The mine, the money there means to an end. A way to give you the life you deserve. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. And what life do you think I deserve, Nathan Xavier? One where you're free to choose your own path. He reached for her hand cautiously, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, he continued, if that path includes me, I'd consider myself the luckiest man alive. If not, he swallowed hard. If not, at least I'll know you're making your choice freely, not forced by circumstance. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. Yet caution held her back from falling too quickly into the same trust that had been broken before. "You proposed to me in a church today," she said softly. "In front of the entire town. Was that impulse, or had you planned it?" A smile touched his lips. "A bit of both. I planned to find you as soon as I returned to explain everything and ask properly. Learning about the wedding accelerated my timeline somewhat." "Somewhat," she echoed with a hint of irony. "Amelia." He shifted closer, his eyes earnest in the fading light. "I know I hurt you by leaving the way I did. I know trust once broken isn't easily mended. But I'm asking for a chance to prove myself to you again, day by day, for as long as it takes." The evening breeze stirred her skirts as she considered his words. Part of her, the part still raw with hurt, wanted to guard her heart more carefully this time. But another part remembered the joy they'd shared before, the dreams they'd whispered under star-filled skies much like tonight's. "I need time," she finally said. "Time to know you again, to be sure." Relief flooded his face. "Time is something I'm happy to give. I'm not going anywhere, Amelia. Not without you." She stood, needing distance to clear her head. "Will you stay in Silver Creek while I decide?" "I've already arranged rooms at the hotel," he confirmed, rising as well. "I'll be here as long as you need." As he prepared to leave, Amelia found herself facing another question. "The proposal in the church, does it still stand?" Nathan's eyes softened. "Every word. But next time I ask, it won't be in the middle of someone else's wedding. It'll be when you're ready to hear it." He tipped his hat before descending the porch steps. "Good night, Amelia." She watched him mount his horse and ride toward town, the silver moonlight illuminating his figure until he disappeared from view. Only then did she permit herself a small, hopeful smile. For the first time in months, the future held possibility again. News traveled quickly in Silver Creek. By the following morning, every resident knew of the dramatic scene at the church, embellished with each retelling until the story featured Nathan bursting through the doors on horseback, guns blazing. Amelia endured the curious stares and whispered comments as she went about her errands in town. The general store fell suspiciously quiet when she entered, only to erupt in hushed conversation the moment she moved to another aisle. "Pay them no mind," advised Mrs. Holloway, the shopkeeper's wife, as she wrapped Amelia's purchases in brown paper. "People will talk themselves hoarse for a week, then find some new scandal to occupy them." "I suppose I've provided quite the entertainment," Amelia replied with forced lightness. "Better an interrupted wedding than an unhappy marriage, dear." The older woman leaned forward conspiratorially. "My sister married for convenience rather than love." 30 years of quiet misery followed. Outside the store, Amelia nearly collided with Gerald Harrington. The banker's expression soured immediately upon seeing her. "Miss Anderson," he said stiffly. "Mr. Harrington," she returned, clutching her parcels closer. "I hope you can accept my sincere apologies for yesterday's events." His mouth twisted into something between a grimace and a smile. "I've survived worse disappointments in my 62 years. Though I will say, your father's choice of son-in-law seems remarkably convenient in its timing." "Nathan's return was unexpected," Amelia replied carefully. "Indeed." Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Almost as unexpected as his sudden wealth. I'd caution you to verify his claims thoroughly before tying yourself to such opportunistic fortune." Before Amelia could respond, a familiar voice intervened. "Mr. Harrington," Nathan greeted, appearing beside Amelia. "I trust the bank drafts were found to be in order." The banker's posture stiffened. "Yes, though I remain curious about your convenient appearance just as the ceremony was about to conclude." "Not convenience, determination." Nathan's tone remained pleasant, but Amelia sensed the steel beneath his words. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I've promised to escort Miss Anderson safely home." Harrington's gaze shifted between them before he offered a curt nod and continued on his way. "I could have handled that myself," Amelia said once the banker was out of earshot. "I know you could." Nathan smiled, offering his arm. "But why should you have to? The man was trying to intimidate you." She hesitated before taking his arm. "Were you following me?" "Not intentionally. I was at the livery stable when I saw you heading this way." His expression grew serious. "Amelia, I meant what I said about giving you time and space. I won't crowd you." Something in his sincerity eased her defensiveness. "Well, since you're here, you might as well carry these parcels." His smile returned as he accepted her bundles. "At your service, madam." They walked along Silver Creek's Main Street, an awkward tension between them gradually giving way to more comfortable conversation. Nathan spoke of changes to the town during his absence, while Amelia shared news of mutual acquaintances. "Sarah Jenkins married the blacksmith's son last month," she told him. "They've moved to his family's property north of town." "Good for them," Nathan replied. "Thomas always was sweet on her, even when we were children." As they approached the edge of town, they passed the small schoolhouse where Amelia occasionally helped teach when the regular schoolmistress was ill. "You still read to the children on Fridays?" Nathan asked, nodding toward the building. Amelia looked at him in surprise. "You remember that?" "I remember everything about you," he said simply. The directness of his statement caught her off guard. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by a group of children spilling out of the schoolhouse, their lessons concluded for the day. "Miss Anderson." Several called out, rushing toward her with excited greetings. Among them was 8-year-old Emma Wilson, whose family ranch bordered the Andersons' property. The little girl looked curiously at Nathan. "Are you Miss Anderson's beau?" she asked with a child's directness. "Mama said a handsome cowboy stopped her wedding because he loved her true." Amelia felt heat rising to her cheeks. "Emma, that's not— I hope to be worthy of that title someday," Nathan interrupted smoothly, tipping his hat to the child. "But right now, I'm just helping Miss Anderson with her packages." Emma considered this answer with grave seriousness before nodding. "My papa carries packages for my mama too. He says it's what gentlemen do." "Your papa is a wise man," Nathan agreed solemnly. After the children dispersed, Amelia and Nathan continued their walk toward the Anderson ranch in thoughtful silence. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty road, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage and distant rain. "The children adore you," Nathan observed eventually. "Teaching gives me purpose," she replied. "During these difficult months, those hours at the schoolhouse were sometimes the only bright spots in my week." Nathan's expression softened. "You always did have a way with little ones." They had reached the gate to the Anderson property when Nathan spoke again, his voice hesitant. "Amelia, would you permit me to call on you properly tomorrow? Perhaps we could ride out to Whisper Creek like we used to." The mention of their old meeting place, a secluded bend in the creek where they had shared their first kiss, sent a flutter through Amelia's chest. "I'm not sure that would be wise," she said carefully. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. "I understand." "But," she continued, surprising herself, "I wouldn't object to a ride around the property. Father could use another perspective on which pastures to prepare first for the new cattle." Hope returned to his eyes. "I'd be honored to offer my opinion. Shall I come by after noon?" "That would be suitable," she agreed, taking her parcels back from him. As she walked the remaining distance to the house alone, Amelia acknowledged the conflicting emotions within her. Anger and hurt still lingered, but alongside them grew something equally powerful, the persistent hope that perhaps Nathan Xavier was exactly who he claimed to be. a man who had risked everything to create a future worthy of her. The following week brought a steady routine to the Anderson ranch. Each day, Nathan would arrive after the midday meal, sometimes bringing maps or documents related to the cattle business, other times simply offering his labor for repairs that had been neglected during the ranch's financial struggles. Jeremiah Anderson, initially wary, gradually warmed to the young man's presence, particularly after Nathan connected him with contacts who could supply equipment and livestock at favorable terms. Amelia maintained a careful distance, observing Nathan's interactions with her father and the ranch hands they'd been able to rehire. He worked alongside them without pretension, despite his newfound wealth, earning their respect through sweat and skill rather than the weight of his pocketbook. "The south pasture needs the most attention," Nathan was saying as he and Amelia rode along the property's boundary one warm afternoon. "The irrigation channels are salvageable, but they'll need clearing before the spring runoff." Amelia nodded, noting how naturally he assessed the land's needs. "You speak as though you plan to have a personal stake in this ranch's success." Nathan reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her. "I hope that I will," he said frankly. "But even if you decide I have no place in your future, Amelia, I'd still want to see this land thrive again." It meant too much to both of us. The sincerity in his voice touched her. Over the past days, she'd watched for any sign that his return was motivated by something other than his proclaimed feelings, perhaps a business interest in her father's land, or a desire to establish himself in the territory. But his actions consistently supported his words. "There's a town social on Saturday," she said abruptly, "at the miller's barn." Nathan's expression brightened. "I've heard mention of it. Would you like to accompany me?" The invitation surprised them both. "I'd be honored," he replied, a smile spreading across his face. They continued their ride, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. As they circled back toward the ranch house, Nathan pointed to a hawk soaring overhead. "Remember when we used to watch them from Lookout Ridge?" he asked. "You said they made you think of freedom." Amelia smiled at the memory. "I wanted to fly away from Silver Creek then, see the big cities back east." And now, she considered the question seriously. "Now I understand that freedom isn't about where you are, but who you're with and whether you've chosen that path yourself." Nathan's eyes held hers. "A wise perspective. Hard-earned," she replied softly. When they returned to the stable, Nathan helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. The contact sent a familiar warmth through her that she wasn't yet ready to acknowledge. "Until Saturday, then?" he asked as they walked toward the house. "Yes," she agreed. "The social begins at 7. He tipped his hat and turned to go, but Amelia called after him impulsively. "Nathan, thank you for today and for—" She hesitated. "For giving me time to sort through my feelings." His smile was gentle. "Some things are worth waiting for." Amelia Anderson. As she watched him ride away, Amelia admitted to herself what she'd been reluctant to face. Despite her caution, despite her lingering hurt, her heart was steadily finding its way back to him. The night of the social arrived with perfect early summer weather. Lanterns hung from the rafters of the miller's barn, casting a warm glow over the cleared floor where couples were already dancing to the lively tunes of a fiddle and harmonica. Amelia had chosen her dress with particular care, a deep blue calico with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Eleanor had helped arrange her hair, weaving small white flowers through the braided crown. "You look lovely," her godmother said approvingly. "That young man won't know what hit him." Amelia blushed. "I'm still taking things slowly, Eleanor." "Of course you are," the older woman replied with a knowing smile. That's why you've been staring out the window every 5 minutes waiting for him to arrive." Before Amelia could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats announced Nathan's arrival. She smoothed her skirts nervously, taking a deep breath before going to meet him. He stood on the porch when she opened the door, and for a moment, neither spoke. Nathan had traded his work clothes for a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and clean trousers. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd trimmed his beard to a tidy shadow along his jaw. "You're beautiful," he said finally, his voice carrying a note of wonder. "You clean up rather well yourself," she replied with a small smile. "Father and Alina will meet us there. He had some business to conclude with Sheriff Miller first." Nathan offered his arm. "Then I'm the luckiest man in the territory to have you all to myself for the ride into town." The journey passed quickly, filled with easy conversation that reminded Amelia of their courtship before his departure. By the time they reached the Miller property, some of her lingering reserve had melted away. Inside the barn, it seemed the entire town had gathered. Music and laughter filled the air, mingling with the scents of pine boughs and fresh baked goods arranged on long tables. "Amelia," Sarah Jenkins, now Sarah Cooper, called out, making her way through the crowd. "And Nathan Xavier. The rumors are true, then?" She embraced Amelia warmly before turning a curious eye to Nathan. "Half the town's been talking about your dramatic return." "Hopefully the better half," Nathan replied good-naturedly. "That depends on whether they had money wagered on you actually going through with the wedding to Old Harrington," Sarah replied with characteristic frankness. "Sarah," Amelia admonished, though she couldn't help but laugh. "Well, it's true. Jenkins at the saloon had a whole betting pool." Sarah's husband Thomas appeared at her side, offering apologetic smiles. "Come, let's get some punch before the next dance starts." As they moved through the crowd, Amelia was acutely aware of the glances and whispers that followed them. Nathan kept a protective hand at the small of her back, his presence steady beside her. Gerald Harrington was notably absent from the gathering, though several of his business associates nodded stiffly in their direction. Amelia felt a momentary twinge of guilt for the public nature of their broken engagement, but it passed quickly when she remembered the loveless future that had awaited her. "Would you care to dance?" Nathan asked as the musicians struck up a waltz. Amelia hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that." He led her onto the floor with confident steps, one hand clasping hers while the other rested properly at her waist. As they began to move with the music, the watching crowd seemed to fade away until there was only the two of them, circling in perfect harmony. "Do you remember the first time we danced?" Nathan asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "The Harvest Festival 2 years ago," she replied. "You stepped on my toes twice," he laughed softly, "and apologized so profusely that your father thought I'd committed some grave offense." "You've improved considerably since then," she observed as he guided her through a seamless turn. "I practiced," he admitted. "Up in the mining camp, I'd count steps while I worked, imagining you in my arms again." The simple confession touched her deeply. "Even when you weren't sure you'd return to find me waiting," his eyes held her steadily. "I never stopped hoping, Amelia, even when I feared you might have given up on me." The music swelled around them as he drew her a fraction closer, still maintaining propriety but bridging the emotional distance she'd kept between them since his return. "I tried to give up," she confessed. "When Father arranged the marriage to Mr. Harrington, I told myself it was for the best, that what we'd had was merely youthful fancy." "And now?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the music. Before she could answer, the waltz ended, and reality intruded in the form of applause and the shuffle of dancers changing partners. "I need some air," Amelia said, suddenly overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment and her own conflicted feelings. Nathan immediately escorted her outside, where the night air cooled her flushed cheeks. They walked a short distance from the barn, stopping beneath a large cottonwood tree where the music was muted but still audible. "I've been unfair to you," Amelia said after a moment of silence. Nathan looked at her in surprise. "How so?" "I've been holding your absence against you, demanding explanations while refusing to truly listen." She turned to face him fully. "The truth is, I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of believing in you again," she admitted. "Of trusting that this time you wouldn't disappear. It was easier to keep you at a distance than risk being hurt twice." Nathan took a step closer, his expression earnest in the moonlight. "I understand that fear, Amelia, and I'd wait a lifetime if that's what it took to earn back your trust." She shook her head slowly. "That's just it. You've already earned it. These past weeks I've watched you work alongside my father, rebuild what was broken, keep every promise you've made. Your actions speak louder than any words could." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Does this mean—" "It means I'm ready to stop dwelling in the past," she said softly. "To see what future we might build together." The joy that transformed his face made her heart skip. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Nathan reached for her hands. "Amelia Anderson," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "From the moment I met you, you've been the star I've steered by. Even when mountains and miles separated us, my heart remained here with you." She felt tears gathering in her eyes, but they were healing tears, washing away the last of her doubt. "When I burst into that church," Nathan continued, "I acted on desperate impulse, but my feelings were never impulsive. They've grown steadier and deeper with every day, every challenge." He drew a shaky breath. "I'm not proposing again. Not tonight. When I do, it will be perfect, worthy of the extraordinary woman you are, but I want you to know that my heart is yours, completely and irrevocably." Amelia felt something final shift within her, like the last tumbler in a lock falling into place. Without words, she closed the distance between them, raising one hand to rest against his cheek. Nathan remained perfectly still, his eyes searching hers for permission. When she nodded slightly, he lowered his head and kissed her with such tenderness that it made her previous doubts seem like distant shadows. The kiss deepened, years of friendship and months of separation culminating in this moment of perfect understanding. When they finally drew apart, both were breathless. "I love you, Nathan Xavier," Amelia whispered, the words feeling both familiar and brand new on her lips. "I never stopped, even when I tried to." His smile was radiant in the moonlight. "Then I truly am the richest man in the territory, and it has nothing to do with silver." From the barn, they could hear the music changing to a livelier tune, calling dancers back to the floor. "Shall we return to the social?" Nathan asked. "Or would you prefer to stay here under the stars a while longer?" Amelia smiled, taking his arm. "Let's dance, Mr. Xavier. We have plenty of nights under the stars ahead of us." Together they walked back toward the light and music, each step bringing them closer to the future they would build together. The weeks following the social brought significant changes to Silver Creek and the Anderson Ranch. With Nathan's financial backing and connections, the property began its transformation back into a working cattle operation. New fences marked restored pastures, and the barn echoed with the sounds of construction as workers expanded the structure to accommodate the expected livestock. Amelia divided her time between helping at the schoolhouse, managing the household, and accompanying Nathan on daily rides around the property. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, moving from cautious reconciliation to secure partnership. One warm afternoon in late June, Nathan arrived at the ranch earlier than usual, a mysterious smile playing at his lips. "I have a surprise for you," he announced as Amelia greeted him on the porch. "Should I be concerned?" she teased, noting his barely contained excitement. "Not at all." He offered his hand. "Come with me." He led her to where two horses waited, already saddled. "I've cleared it with your father. We'll be back before sundown." Intrigued, Amelia mounted her mare and followed Nathan away from the ranch house, riding north along a familiar trail that eventually branched toward Whisper Creek. The spot held special memories for them, both. It was where they had first declared their feelings for each other 2 years earlier. When they reached the creek, Amelia was surprised to see a small picnic laid out beneath the spreading branches of an old oak tree. A checkered blanket covered the grass, and a wicker basket sat waiting. "When did you arrange this?" she asked, delighted by the thoughtful gesture. "This morning," Nathan admitted, helping her dismount. "With some assistance from a leaner." They settled on the blanket, and Nathan produced a feast of cold chicken, fresh bread, and early summer berries. As they ate, they reminisced about previous visits to this spot, laughing at shared memories. "Do you remember when we got caught in that sudden downpour?" Amelia asked. "You gave me your coat and ended up looking like a drowned rat." "Worth every sneeze that followed," Nathan replied with a grin. "You were wearing that yellow dress. I couldn't have you catching cold." After they had eaten, Nathan grew unexpectedly quiet, his expression turning serious. "What is it?" Amelia asked, reaching for his hand. He squeezed her fingers gently. "I've been thinking about timing." "Timing?" "Yes." He shifted to face her more directly. "When I return to Silver Creek, I promise to give you time to let you set the pace of our reconciliation." Amelia nodded, her heart beginning to race. "You've been very patient." "Patient isn't the word I'd use," he said with a soft laugh. "More like hopeful, determined. Occasionally terrified you'd send me packing." "Nathan, please let me finish." He took a deep breath. "Amelia, these past weeks have been the happiest of my life. Rebuilding your father's ranch, earning back your trust, watching you smile again, it's everything I dreamed of during those long months away." He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I promised that when I proposed again, it would be perfect, worthy of you. I hope this comes close." Amelia's breath caught as he opened the pouch and tipped a ring into his palm. It was exquisite, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, set in delicate silver filigree. "The stone reminded me of your eyes," Nathan said softly. "I had it set in Denver before returning to Silver Creek." "You've had it all this time," she whispered. He nodded. "I carried it with me every day, waiting for the right moment." Taking her hand, he slid from the blanket to one knee. "Amelia Anderson, you are the bravest, kindest, most extraordinary woman I've ever known. Would you do me the immeasurable honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Amelia's eyes as everything came full circle. From their first meetings at this very creek, through separation and reunion, to this perfect moment, their story had been unfolding toward this. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, Nathan Xavier, I will marry you." His face lit with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the sapphire catching the dappled sunlight filtering through the oak leaves above them. "I was so afraid you might still need more time," he admitted, rising to sit beside her once more. Amelia shook her head, admiring the ring that symbolized their future. "I've had all the time I need. The past is behind us. I'm ready for our life together to begin." Nathan cradled her face in his hands, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart soar. When they drew apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I have one more surprise," he said. "More than this." She held up her newly adorned hand. a different kind of surprise. He reached into the picnic basket and withdrew a folded document. I wasn't sure when to show you this, but now seems right. Curious, Amelia accepted the paper and unfolded it. It appeared to be a deed or land grant of some kind. "What is this?" she asked, scanning the legal terminology. "It's the deed to a property adjacent to your father's ranch," Nathan explained. 30 acres with a view of the mountains and creek access. I purchased it last week." Amelia looked up in surprise. "You bought land here. What about your silver mine?" "The mine continues to operate under Curtis's management," he said. "But our future is here in Silver Creek. I thought we might build a home of our own on that land, close enough to help your father with the ranch, but with some independence too." The thoughtfulness of his plan touched Amelia deeply. It offered the perfect balance, proximity to her family while establishing their own household. "That sounds wonderful," she said sincerely. "Have you shown father?" Nathan nodded. "I consulted him before making the purchase. He suggested the particular parcel, actually said it had the best soil and water access." Amelia laughed softly. "You two have become quite the conspirators." "He's a good man, your father," Nathan said seriously. "Proud, sometimes stubborn, but he loves you fiercely. When I asked for his blessing to propose again, he made me promise to always put your happiness first." "And will you?" she asked, her tone lightly teasing though her eyes were serious. "Every day of our lives," he promised, sealing the vow with another kiss. They remained by the creek until late afternoon, planning their future home, discussing wedding dates, and simply enjoying the perfect happiness of the moment. When they finally rode back to the ranch, the setting sun painted the landscape in gold and amber, a fitting backdrop to their joy. Eleanor was the first to spot the ring when they returned, giving a delighted cry that brought Jeremiah hurrying from his study. The older man's eyes grew suspiciously moist as he embraced his daughter and shook Nathan's hand firmly. "A September wedding would be lovely," Eleanor suggested over the celebratory dinner she hastily prepared. "The weather will still be fair, and it gives us enough time for proper preparations." "September sounds perfect," Amelia agreed, glancing at Nathan for confirmation. He smiled, covering her hand with his. "I'd marry you tomorrow if I could, but September will do nicely." That night, after Nathan had returned to town with promises to begin consulting builders about their home the very next day, Amelia stood on the porch gazing at the stars. Her father joined her, offering a rare glass of his good whiskey. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. She touched her glass to his. "And second chances." They sipped in companionable silence for a moment before Jeremiah spoke again. "I owe you an apology, Amelia," he said quietly. "When I arranged your marriage to Harrington, I convinced myself it was for your security. But it was my pride that couldn't bear losing the ranch my father built. You were trying to protect our home," she replied gently, "at the cost of your happiness." He shook his head regretfully. "I'm grateful that young man had the courage to do what I couldn't, put your well-being above everything else." Amelia leaned her head against her father's shoulder, a gesture of forgiveness and understanding that meant more than words could express. "Life has a way of working out, doesn't it?" She mused. "Indeed it does, daughter," Jeremiah agreed, his voice gruff with emotion. "Indeed it does." The summer passed in a flurry of activity. Construction began on Nathan and Amelia's house, a handsome 2-story structure of local stone and timber that would overlook both the creek and the distant mountains. Nathan divided his time between overseeing the building and helping Jeremiah prepare for the arrival of new cattle. Amelia threw herself into wedding preparations with Eleanor's enthusiastic assistance. The entire town seemed invested in the celebration, perhaps partly due to the dramatic way their engagement had begun. Women gathered to help sew Amelia's wedding dress, and the church that had nearly witnessed her marriage to Harrington was being renovated specifically for the September ceremony. "It feels almost like a dream," Amelia confessed to Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch swing at the ranch house, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "After everything, to find such happiness." "Not a dream," he assured her, his arm around her shoulders. "Though I'll admit, I sometimes wake up worrying I might still be in that mining camp, fevered and hallucinating all of this." She laughed, nestling closer to his side. "And what convinces you it's real, this?" he said simply, pressing a kiss to her temple. "No fever dream could capture the way you feel in my arms." Their wedding day dawned clear and bright, with just enough crispness in the air to herald the approaching autumn. The church had been transformed with wildflowers and ribbons, every pew filled with friends and neighbors from across the territory. In a small room at the back of the church, Alina helped Amelia with the final touches of her ensemble, a gown of ivory satin with delicate lace overlays that they had worked on together throughout the summer. "Your mother would be so proud of you today," Alina said softly, adjusting the simple veil. "She always hoped you would find a love like this." Amelia blinked back tears, careful not to disturb the careful preparations. "I wish she could be here. She is in her way." Alina placed a cameo brooch at Amelia's throat, a family heirloom that had belonged to her mother. "There. Now you're ready." In the church, Nathan stood at the altar, his best friend Thomas serving as his groomsman. Though he maintained his composure, his hands betrayed his nervousness, repeatedly smoothing down his new suit coat. When the music began, and the church doors opened to reveal Amelia on her father's arm, Nathan's breath caught visibly. The assembled guests turned to watch her procession, but Nathan saw only her radiant, strong, and walking toward him with unwavering purpose. Jeremiah placed his daughter's hand in Nathan's with solemn dignity before taking his seat in the front pew. As they turned to face the Reverend, the same man who had nearly married Amelia to Harrington, Nathan whispered words meant only for her. "I've dreamed of this moment since the day I left." Her answering smile carried all the forgiveness and love he had hoped to earn. The ceremony proceeded with traditional simplicity, their voices clear and steady as they exchanged vows. When Nathan slipped the gold band onto Amelia's finger to join her engagement ring, his hands no longer trembled. "By the authority vested in me," the Reverend proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Nathan needed no prompting to kiss his bride, though he maintained a respectful restraint given their setting. The church erupted in applause and cheers as they turned to face their community as husband and wife. The celebration that followed at the Anderson ranch lasted well into the evening. Tables laden with food stretched across the yard, lanterns hung from tree branches, and a platform had been constructed for dancing. It seemed everyone in Silver Creek had contributed something to the feast, each offering representing the community's blessing on their union. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Nathan led Amelia away from the festivities to a quiet spot beneath an old apple tree. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Completely," she assured him, resting her hands on his chest. "Though I'm beginning to think we should make our escape soon. Mrs. Jenkins has been telling everyone within earshot exactly what advice she's given me for our wedding night." Nathan laughed, the sound warm and rich in the gathering twilight. "Your godmother intercepted her before she could corner me with similar wisdom." "Thank goodness for Alina," Amelia said with a smile. "She's been my rock through all of this." "She loves you like a daughter," Nathan observed. "I'm grateful you had her during those months when I was away." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with the distant sounds of music and laughter from their wedding celebration. "Our house should be finished within the month," Nathan said eventually. "Curtis sent word that the mine is producing even better than expected. We can furnish it however you like." "I don't need extravagance," Amelia replied, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "Just a home filled with love." "That," he promised, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm, "you will have in abundance, Mrs. Xavier." The new name sent a thrill through her. "I like the sound of that, as do I." His expression grew more serious. "Amelia, I want you to know that I understand what a gift you've given me, your forgiveness, your trust restored. I promise to spend every day earning that gift anew. And I promise to remember that love sometimes requires patience and faith," she replied. "That the path isn't always straight, but the destination is worth every step." Nathan drew her closer, his kiss conveying everything words could not: devotion, gratitude, and the promise of a lifetime together. When they finally returned to their guests, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, witnesses to the beginning of their shared journey. Late that night, after the last guests had departed, and they had said their goodbyes to Jeremiah and Alina, Nathan and Amelia rode in a decorated buggy to the Silver Creek Hotel. The finest suite had been prepared for them, another of Nathan's surprises, a temporary haven, until their own home was complete. As they stood together in the privacy of their room, the reality of their new status as husband and wife created a momentary shyness between them. Nathan solved this by lifting Amelia's hand and slowly removing her glove, pressing a kiss to each fingertip. "I've waited so long for this moment," he murmured, "yet now I find myself wanting to savor every second." Amelia's initial nervousness melted under his tender attention. "We have a lifetime of moments ahead of us," she reminded him softly. "So we do, my love," he agreed. "So we do." In the warm intimacy that followed, they discovered the final dimension of their bond, physical communion that expressed what their hearts already knew. As they lay together afterward, Amelia's head resting on Nathan's chest while he traced lazy patterns along her bare shoulder, the last lingering shadows of their separation dissolved completely. "I was thinking," Nathan said into the comfortable silence, "about your work at the schoolhouse." "Hum." Amelia replied drowsily. "Silver Creek is growing. There are more children every year, but still just one schoolmistress." His fingers continued their gentle caress. "What would you think about taking a more formal teaching position? Perhaps even starting a proper school of your own someday?" Amelia raised her head to look at him, touched by his understanding of her passion for education. "You wouldn't mind a wife with her own profession?" "Mind? I'd be proud," he said sincerely. "You have so much to offer those children, Amelia. I wouldn't want our marriage to limit your gifts." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for seeing me, truly seeing me." "Always," he promised. They fell asleep in each other's arms, secure in their love and the future they would build together, a future neither could have imagined during those long months of separation and uncertainty. 2 years later, on a perfect spring morning, Nathan Xavier stood on the porch of their stone house, watching his wife in the garden with their infant daughter. The little girl, just beginning to toddle on unsteady legs, clutched a wildflower in her chubby fist as Amelia guided her steps among the rows of vegetables and herbs. The sound of their laughter carried on the breeze, mingling with the distant lowing of cattle from the Anderson ranch, now restored to its former prosperity. In the shade of the porch, Nathan savored the moment, etching it into his memory alongside so many others from their life together. Their home had become exactly what they'd envisioned, a place of warmth and welcome, not only for their growing family, but for the community they'd helped nurture. The front parlor often served as an informal classroom where Amelia tutored children who needed extra attention, while the study housed both Nathan's mining business papers and Amelia's plans for the larger schoolhouse being constructed in town. "Papa, Papa." His daughter spotted him and changed course, wobbling determinedly toward the porch steps. Nathan descended quickly to meet her, sweeping her into his arms. "What treasure have you found, little one?" The child presented her slightly crushed flower with solemn pride. "It's beautiful, just like you," he assured her, earning a delighted giggle. Amelia joined them, her garden basket filled with fresh vegetables for the evening meal. Though teaching responsibilities and motherhood kept her busy, she had never looked more radiant. "I was thinking," she said as they walked together into the house, "about inviting Father and Alina for Sunday dinner. Father mentioned wanting to discuss expanding the cattle operation again." "An excellent idea," Nathan agreed, settling their daughter in her high chair. "The latest report from the mine shows we could easily finance another expansion if he's ready." Their partnership extended beyond marriage into a harmonious balance of family and business interests. Nathan continued to oversee the silver mine through trusted managers, making occasional trips to inspect operations, but primarily focusing on local investments that strengthened Silver Creek's economy. Amelia divided her time between family, teaching, and helping Alina with various charitable endeavors in town. They had established a small fund to assist other struggling ranchers, remembering all too well how close the Anderson property had come to foreclosure. That evening, after their daughter was tucked into bed, Nathan and Amelia sat on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and crimson. It had become their daily ritual, these quiet moments together at day's end. "I received a letter from Gerald Harrington today," Amelia mentioned, her head resting comfortably on Nathan's shoulder. "Oh," Nathan's arm tightened slightly around her. Though the banker had eventually accepted their marriage with grudging politeness, relations had remained cool. "He's retiring to Denver and selling the bank to his nephew." She traced a pattern on Nathan's palm. "He actually wished us well, said he's observed our contribution to Silver Creek's growth these past years and finds it commendable." Nathan chuckled. "High praise indeed from our friend Harrington. It made me think about how differently things might have turned out," Amelia mused, "if you hadn't found that silver claim, if you hadn't returned when you did." "I would have found another way," Nathan said with quiet certainty. "Even without the silver, I would have come back for you, Amelia. Worked any job, faced any challenge," she smiled, knowing it was true. "Fate was kind to give us our second chance." "Not fate," he corrected gently. "Determination. Love, the willingness to fight for what matters most." The first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the evening sky as they sat together, contemplating the journey that had brought them to this perfect contentment. "You ever wonder," Amelia asked softly, "what adventures still await us?" Nathan considered the question, his hand finding hers. "I imagine watching our daughter grow, perhaps giving her brothers and sisters to play with, building that larger school you've been planning, seeing Silver Creek flourish into the kind of town our children can be proud of." "That sounds like a wonderful adventure," she agreed. "The best kind," he replied, "because we'll experience it together." As darkness settled over the land they both loved, Nathan and Amelia Xavier remained on their porch, wrapped in each other's arms and the peaceful certainty of their shared future. The path that had once seemed broken beyond repair had led them here to this home, this family, this abiding love, and neither would change a single step of the journey.